Today, we're continuing to look at Unit 5.10, Civil War battles, keeping in mind our same key questions, some of the significant battles, their impact, turning point battle, and what is total war. The key turning point battle of the Civil War is the Battle of Gettysburg. Gettysburg will occur in Pennsylvania in the summer of 1863. General Lee and the Confederacy will invade the Union. Remember, we talked about how almost all the fighting will happen in the Confederate States. This is an exception. It is unsuccessful. 3 areas of fighting within the main battle, Little Round Top, Cemetery Ridge, and Pickett's Charge, are all famous components of that battle. And North Carolina troops will be some of the furthest to advance in this battle. The Confederacy, however, is unsuccessful and suffers huge losses. At the time, it wasn't clear that the Confederacy would never recover. But upon reflection today, we know that from Gettysburg on, the Confederacy was losing more and more strength. So here, if you look at the image, you could see how they would show some of those formations and movements of different units, right? Confederate in red, the Union in blue, moving toward each other and fighting under each of their commanders. And here you can look at our main map and see Gettysburg here just into Pennsylvania, not very far from Washington, D.C. Right here. Gettysburg suffered so much loss that President Lincoln felt the need to commemorate the battlefield. And he will give one of the most famous speeches in U.S. history in November of 1863, several weeks after the battle. And he really uses this speech as a chance to define the meaning of the war and its purpose. We're going to listen to that speech now.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
So again, one of the most famous speeches, and you can tell it's not very long, it's a very short speech, but it really honors the dead. And note, he doesn't distinguish between which side, right, Confederate or Union, and that he harkens back to the purpose of what America was meant to be. Now we need to talk about a term called total war. We've mentioned this before, right? Total war. All parts of a society are used for the war effort, and therefore all parts of society are targets. Remember, you can pause at any time if you need more time to write. I'm going to proceed to watching a video, so if you need to continue writing in your guided notes, you need to pause now.
Total war is the most extreme form of warfare, one where any action or behavior is acceptable to stop or conquer an enemy. In a normal war, on the other hand, soldiers fight other soldiers and do what they can, within reason, to protect the enemy's families and property. In total war, soldiers can be seen as a liability. If they surrender, they don't have to be taken prisoner, they can be killed. That way, they can't escape later and rejoin their comrades. If the soldiers involved in total warfare are taken prisoner, they often end up doing hard labor or some other task that is high risk. If the prisoners of war do the difficult work, the soldiers don't have to. Ultimately, everyone is considered the enemy in total war. Civilians and soldiers alike are targets. Civilians may even be randomly captured and killed just to demonstrate the resolve of the combatants. In addition, stopping any and all movement of military equipment, soldiers, food, resources, and civilians, among other things, is often employed to defeat the enemy. If the people are getting less of what they need, this may weaken their will and make it easier to conquer them. In ancient times, total war was often the norm. The Persians razed cities while they were creating their empire, and so too did the Egyptians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. All four empires...
Okay, so you get the main idea behind total war. This idea that all parts of society are free to be attacked, particularly the more important industrialization, mass production, infrastructure like telegraph and railroad become, the more those things are going to become a target. And so these are going to become targets of war. If we can blow up railroad lines and stations, and the enemy can't get its soldiers' supplies back and forth, things like that. Civilians also become targets, especially in a democracy. In a democracy, the people have a voice. So if you can convince the enemy's people to no longer want to fight, then they could use their voice, their vote, to elect people who will surrender or end the war. So you want to attack the civilians, cut off their supplies, bomb them, whatever it takes to get them to take their political support away from the war. The goal in total war is to destroy an enemy's will and ability to fight, demoralize the enemy till there's no support among the public for the war effort, and destroy their ability to fight. This doesn't just mean kill off their soldiers. It means stop the ways of transporting goods to their soldiers, destroy the factories that are producing the weapons. Right? All sorts of things fall under this. In the Civil War, your best example of this is something known as Sherman's March to the Sea. General William Tecumseh Sherman was a Union general, and he will lead this march to the sea in the winter of 1864. He will march specifically from Atlanta to Savannah, roughly 300 miles, and he will destroy everything along the way. Roads, towns, farms, barns, homes, everything along the way. And he's famous for saying war is hell. Sherman acknowledges that this is ugly and not necessarily proud of it, but it's what he felt and the Union Army felt was necessary in order to end this war and bring it to its conclusion. So here you can see, right, Atlanta right here and Sherman's march here. After Savannah, Sherman will be making his way north, his intent being to join Ulysses S. Grant up in the Potomac, as pretty much this part of the South has been conquered. Sherman was actually supposed to be heading toward Wilmington and to help take over Wilmington, but the city of Wilmington will fall before that can happen. The naval invasion will happen in Wilmington Falls. So in a sense, we are spared the destruction of Sherman because we fall to the Union before he can get there. So for classwork today, we are going to move forward and work on a map. I'm going to give you that map here shortly. We will label the states. We will color code the key: border states, Union states, Confederate states. You need to do border states first. They are your most important to be distinct. After you've colored in the border states, it's easy to color everything north of them Union, everything south of them Confederate. And then we need to add a couple key battles: Fort Sumter, Bull Run, Vicksburg, Antietam, and Gettysburg. Here is the map you will be using. Remember, you can go back and forth in this video, so if you need to go back and see what your directions are, you can rewind this video and everyone can work at their own pace to complete their map.